Howdys and salutations, y'all, and welcome back. Apologies for the slight delay. Had some minor overlay tech issues, but we are back in business. My Sims month has been a lot of fun, but I also feel like I've sort of done the break I need to make, and I'm back in the mood, I'm back in the zone to do some more art stuff. And I've got new ideas. This is not my art, obviously. This is Witch Hat Atelier by Kamome Shirahama. Or Kamome Shirahama? I apologize. I'm not great at pronunciations on any names, really. But yes, so we spent a lot of time doing art challenges and practicing our styles and things like that. But whenever you get too wrapped up in that and you run into a wall, oftentimes that's a sign that's a good chance to go back and do some studies. Study styles I like, learn different things, build off of that. So that's what we're doing today. We've taken our pause. We'll probably come back to My Sims at some point though, because it is a lot of fun. We've done our pause, and now we are jumping back into Witch Hat, into master studies, or style studies, as I like to call them, because people get into a lot of arguments about who's a master and who's not, but like nobody gets mad if you're like, oh, I like their style, so like, meh. Master studies tends to evoke like art schools where you're studying like, I don't know, Michelangelo or something, which is not to say that Michelangelo is not a master, but I think there's also lots of modern ones that don't get quite the appreciation when you go with that sort of description. And I've gotten hooked on a new manga, a new to me manga, that I'm quite fond of, called Witch Hat Atelier, which I've not finished. I'm still trying to catch up because the Kodansha, which is the publisher, their app, not great. Not great. The Viz app has been really nice, for the record, not sponsored by Diddly Squat, obviously. But like the Viz app, it's a very cheap subscription. I think $2 a month, which adds up to $24 a year, which I'm more than willing to do, given how much I read on it. Honestly, I'm willing to do that just to keep up with Sleepy Princess. But not actually. Like I like having other things on the app too. That one's nice because I can keep up to date and I can read the latest stuff and all that. The Kodansha one has been a weird choice. It's one of those coin system ones, sort of like Webtoons and some of the others, and I think they're much more common over in like Eastern Asia, but it's not a great system. Mainly because it's a lot more expensive, and there's all sorts of weird like game mechanic restrictions and pseudo currencies to make you waste your time and energy and money and watch ads and all that junk. And like, I don't know, I'm very much a manga binger. I like to binge the stuff. I enjoy reading it paced out as well, but like I really liked the Flying Witch on there as well, and I was reading it paced out as I got the Tick of Sun locket, but at some point, and I did the same with this one for a while, but at some point you hit a wall on that one where they're like, oh, like, your account doesn't get you access, and the tickets are no longer valid for these. What you need is the other pseudo-currency called points, which are much harder to earn, and you should spend money on them. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that. So, I shall be looking for other ways to read it, perhaps local libraries and such. But what I've read has been wonderful. And I did pick up the first volume just to have it, because I love the art style. It's so just wonderful. And so I figured it'd be an excellent one to do a study on, especially because it's very much different from what we've done before. Although still somewhat in theme with Witchtober, oddly enough, which ended nearly a month ago. Such is the way. But yes, so we'll be doing a style study here, because I really love... Now, I don't usually like cross-hatching styles, I'll be honest. They don't usually do it for me. I find they often look... A lot of the ones where they really lean into the cross-hatching, I find look messy. But this one manages to do it so well because they do the cross-hatching where it follows the texture of the pattern, which is, I mean, I hate to say what you're supposed to do because it's art, you can do whatever you want, but it's it means the crosshatches add volume and add like texture and detail. So it's not just changing the value of light and darkness, they're actually contributing more to the shape and form and all of that of the art, and they tend to flow with it rather than fighting against it. And I personally tend to prefer that a lot more, if you're going to do cross-hatching. And I've gotten into micron pens lately, so cross-hatching is on my mind. And I've been curious how any of that will translate to digital. I was looking for pens, and Clip Studio Paint's pen store is... I don't think the search bar worked. I don't know what was wrong, if I'm using the wrong browser or something, but nothing I put into the search bar did anything to the website. Like, it wouldn't even, like, refresh the page. And when you're not using the search or filter, because they're both busted, at least for me, then it's kind of hard to find pens. So I will continue searching for proper microns. But in the meantime, I'll go ahead and put this cover away with Coco. It's a wonderfully adorable story, but it's also like a fairly serious one, which is nice, because I usually do the really lighthearted kind of, not empty ones, but like, because I like well-written characters and all that. I don't want just like empty shells, but they don't necessarily have the highest of stakes. This one's got a good, engaging story with real threats, and yet it's still fun and manages to remain lighthearted where it needs to be. It does it super well. It reminds me of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the TV show, obviously not the movie, where it also ran that amazing balance of very real, very serious problems and very thought-out characters that all react in interesting ways to each other, and believable ways that can, like, with character growth and all of that. But it also has its lighthearted moments, which for the most part work, and like this one, it does a wonderful job. So I've been really enjoying that. Plus, the author and the creator of Owl House also did fan art for each other, so I'm just like, hey, artists I like who know or at least acknowledge each other, that's fun. So I'm excited about that. We'll put this away, and we'll break out the canvas. But there's a little more than just that. I have pre-selected a couple of pages from the Kodansha viewer just as a reference. I've got them pulled up, which I'll display on the overlay in a second. And we will jump into this and see, if I can get back into the swing of things with, like, any sort of controls, because it has been a while since I've done digital art. I've been really, really enjoying physical media again, because I always do. Then again, that's not true. There was a long time where I hated sketching. Thought it was the worst art form to do. Like, obviously, like, I didn't hate other people's sketches or viewing sketches, but the act of sketching was miserable, and I was like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. It was only a combination of the pandemic and being, like, head over heels in a fandom where I wanted to draw fan art of the characters that got me to start. And that combined with finally finding a decent art tutorial on drawing people, because there's so many, and it's not that they're bad, but I feel like it's sort of different advice will resonate with different people, so you just kind of have to find one that fits for you. And I found one that fit for me back in 2020, before I started streaming, obviously, on Enviato Tuts. That was just like a free little, like, how to draw tutorial, and how to draw people specifically, and it's just great. I still, like, I've looked at a lot of different guides, and I've refined how I approach drawing people a little bit now, and I've got my own things, but they're all still pretty heavily based on that one, because of all the ones I've seen, it's, like, the best combination of, like, a reasonable facsimile to like, the person, so you can translate the planning into the actual drawing, but it's also not so hyper over convoluted that you need to, like, master anatomy or, like, spend 30 minutes setting up the drawing to get into it. Like, it's a really nice balance. Highly recommend Enviato Tuts for that one. Do I even need to say not sponsored? Obviously not sponsored. I don't make money off of this. This is purely for fun. 100%. Be fun to make money off of it someday. That would contribute to the fun, but that's not it's not really on the to-do list right now. Yeah. I tried to do too many different things at once. I haven't got the time to go into, like, managing social media and building in, like, a public appearance and, like, personal branding beyond what I've already got. Brand management is not really my cup of tea, but that's okay. Because we were actually doing things, and I'm not just gonna whine about managing a stream all day. Because it's true, I enjoy this. I do enjoy streaming. I have those moments right before, like, where it's earlier in the day, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it this evening, but then I get on here, and it's almost always better. I'm like, okay, this is fun, this is good. Although, despite having, like, a ton of time to prep, I didn't notice the overlays were busted until, like, 3 minutes before stream, so that was an unpleasant surprise. But we'll get into the actual art, and then I suspect the fun will return. So here is our first one. I've done this one in actual pen too, so I've already got a decent sense of like what I want to look at. And so we'll mostly, for this first one, be focusing on how to translate these ideas to the digital tools. And then we'll get more into, and I'll discuss sort of what I've learned about the style from my initial study, and pen and paper, and then we'll jump into some other ones and see what we can do. Because that's one of the perks of the style studies, or at least that's one of the, not the perks, the way I do style studies, and the way I recommend doing it, is generally, like, you know, obviously you find the style you like, and obviously you credit the origin source, you don't trace it, you don't claim it as fully original. This is practice, this is, you know, all that. But then you go through and you try to like really break down as you're drawing it. You have to, you can't just like mimic it and be like, okay, I've got it. You have to like, well, you don't have to, but I find it's beneficial to try to think through how are they approaching things, why are they putting certain lines there, what different pieces are there, what order did they likely do this in, and so on. Whew. Pardon my yawns. I am still getting back into post-Thanksgiving routine. By the way, happy Thanksgiving to all the folks who celebrate that. Let's see. Okay, so let's just focus on the funky little tower on this house for now. So I may even zoom in on that a little bit. Let's see. Right, I have to sort of... That'll probably do for now. Oh, right, part of it's... Oh, don't want to move that. This one, let's move that down. Y'all see that okay? Hopefully you can see that okay. Oh, cool, SifBot. I'm gonna have to work on it not sending me notifications during stream, but at least it works if 15 minutes late. I'm not gonna bother with fixing that right now. Another time. Okay. I think we fidgeted with this enough, don't y'all? Okay. Now we have. Okay. So let's focus on this, and like I'll think about it the way that I often think about my stuff too. I don't know for sure that this is the order the artist does it. They did a speed draw of Coco, but it was more of a speed ink, where they already had the drawing sketched out, which was fascinating and very cool and very fun and awesome that they did that. But it wasn't really like you know, actually like what's the process necessarily on all of this. Although it was useful for the inking stuff. But thinking through, usually what I would do here first is like get the overall shape. And silhouette. I say silhouette, in this case it really is more like outline. Okay, yeah, yep, gotta get the hang of managing the tablet again, because those aren't quite... Alright, first off, good, we got it on the right proportions, we're not getting double wide, excellent. I'm gonna look at the top and see that it's pretty narrow in our reference, like it's really, like there's not a lot to it. And the bottom is, let's see, fair distance down. I'm not trying to match 1-to-1, but I would like to try to kind of get the angles right. So actually, I think we're pretty good on this one. I'm going to do the trick, and I recommend this trick to anyone who's... You may not even be drawing from life, but it's still helpful from drawing from reference, is if you're not sure the angle on something, which because of perspective, I'm almost never sure the angle on anything. I literally just hold my pencil up to the reference, and I'm like, okay, here's the angle of my pencil pointed at the reference, and then I just rotate like my arm so I don't change the angle of the actual like pencil or pen. I'm just like hold it over the paper and I'm like, okay, that's the angle. Just map it 1-to-1, angle to angle. That said, despite the angle difference, distance is also a factor. I feel like this ought to be slightly more narrow, and then widen at the bottom. Not that much more narrow though. And then like kind of down here into the wider shape. Oh, it is a vector layer, but that's not a vector eraser. Cool. Okay, so we'll do that for our rough sort of outline shape. We'll worry about getting more of the details in a little bit. And then the next thing that I'm sort of thinking through, looking at the style and kind of looking at the way they do a lot of these, especially this particular one, is I kind of like the contour lines that are outlining the volume. Like there's a couple of different types of like hash marks or hatching or whatever you want to call it. in this particular shape. Like, there's the ones where it's all the, like, quick little detail ones. Those are adding, basically, value in texture, where you can have, like, a high density of a whole bunch of them, and you get, like, a darker look, or, like, lower density implies, like, lighter, and so on. And then these curves imply a certain texture, whether it's thatch, or, like, stucco or weaving, or, like, stonework even, I'm not entirely sure on this one. It's a fairly distant image of the Atelier. But it does give the texture so you can tell it's at least comprised of something there. The level of detail doesn't need it to be super precise, it just needs to be there. See. Well, that overlap's going to be a pain to vector erase, but all the rest of these, pretty easy. But then secondary to that, you can sort of see there's these volume or shape contour lines that are going around it. And you can see, like, you can tell this is like an expanding funnel, even though we don't have an outline. Just because of the curve of those lines. And I think what I would typically do would be thinking through the form, like the form of this object first, and then the details on it. You generally want to work from more general to more specific. So looking at this, and again, I'm sure with the actual one they did like pencil, and then like all of these lines are technically detail lines. But for the purposes of our style study, I'm not going to worry too much about that exactly, and let's just focus on the contours. And I mean, even though I know we're not doing the detail or like shading value ones yet, it still pays to keep them in mind a little bit, because you can see that even the contour lines, like, they don't carry all the way around into the brightest spots. They're very much concentrated on one side for now, like especially at the top. And I'll sort of leave space. We'll come back and get the nice little detail patch there later. This artist also, I'm fairly sure, uses like actual like ink dip pens, sort of the sort you would use for calligraphy and other art like that, for her inking. So that's obviously going to contribute a little bit as well. Okay, let's try to make these slightly more consistently angled. We got a little off there in the middle. And then normally I wouldn't do the back and forth, but that is actually me trying to look at the style, and you can sort of tell. Like in some spots it's going back and forth, it adds a little more texture, a little more depth. I do want to make sure that it's continuing all the way to this edge, which is just harder on digital than physical. And then we'll deal with this lower part in a minute. It's kind of got like, well, let's see. I don't remember how to draw a circle. The opening's away from where I actually need, then like, okay, that'll do. We'll tweak that later. That's just a placeholder. And you can see at this point that this still looks terrible and nothing like it. So this is one of those moments where I'm going to say, trust the process, like wait on it. Don't bail immediately just because your halfway step doesn't look good. This is, after all, the halfway step. Now, the next thing I do is a little bit more of like key details. So we're not going to get into all of the like little stones and marks and everything, but like getting the circle down here, and then especially getting this lovely little like stucco work, which I'm going to go slightly sharper, apparently. Fine with that. And we'll erase any lines that are running into it. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is looking at this reference, and you got to look kind of close at it. There's actually a third type of hatching in there. And this is one that I'd do first, because once again, we're working from general, like broader forms down to specific details. So we've got the overall shape of this. The next thing we would probably want to look at is the shape of the like main highlights and shadows. So before we worry about how the light and shadow bounces off of each individual like shingle or piece in this, you're going to have the general like light sources on one side, shadow is on the other, or wherever your light sources are, you're going to have the general shadow forms from that. And the way I would look at that one is, or at least the way that this artist seems to, is actually like very faint extra hatching. Like not all of the hatch marks that you can see. Let me grab my mouse again, sort of point this out a little more. But like not all of the hatch marks you can see, especially on the left side, are these shingle like quick short hatches. There's also some that are actually going across to add extra darkness, and that sort of sense, I realize y'all can't see my mouse behind it, but there's sort of the sense of like a broader shadow on the left side. So we will take a little more look at that next. And again, this I'm just going to do very fast and loose. We're not going to worry too much about the top. But getting down to somewhere around here, I'm going to start just doing some, just like a broad shape. Like, I'm not worried too much about these showing up as individual. Oop, I actually want to continue that down further. This, because it bulbs out, will be a little different. We'll deal with that. Let's see. And again, we're just capturing the general placement of the shadow here. I'm just getting a lot of marks in. Ah, my marks are so much messier digitally. I'm going to have to work on that still, but that's okay. I mean, honestly, they're not really. Micron just be that way. I think they're just, I wish I had a pen that actually worked like a Micron, where you can get, like, way fainter than it actually says you can, by getting an edge tilt to it. I mean, that's the whole reason I got a tilt-sensitive, like, tablet, and I've been struggling to find pens that use tilt in the way I would expect. So, gonna have to keep looking at that. Alright. And then, let's see. So now that we've got kind of a broad shadow in here, now we might start looking at individual shingle type pieces and individual details like that. I may also go ahead and, like, sort of mark off. You can see even this was not, like, terribly detailed, because it doesn't need to be. This is one piece of a much larger, like, even the initial shot I showed wasn't the full image on this. This is just a little piece. But we've got, like, some little detail. I'm just kind of copying it verbatim, but even as you're copying verbatim, you want to think about what are they doing with it. They're adding a little bit of volume in here, a little bit of value, so it's you've got this nice bright area without the hatching, without the shingles, to make this pop, so you can actually see this window, because it is important later in the story. Actually, it's not. I'm thinking of the wrong place. Well, in any case, it's a window. And you get, like, a little bit of depth, because you can see kind of the hatching that's, like, fully dark in there, and then, like, not exactly clear whether there's, like, a person in there, or just, like, a lamp, or it's just, like, the edge of a blind or something. And it doesn't need to be. So the artist doesn't focus too much on that detail. But this next part, now that we've got, like, you know, that's where the shadow goes. Again, we'll deal with this circle later. But now that we've got the general shadow in there, now I think we can actually start to look at details. So I'm going to start making my way through. I'm actually thinking we may want a couple more contour lines. Now's a good chance also to sort of examine, like, is this matching the style? I noticed in the original they have, like, a much higher density of these rings around, because the shingles are, I'm calling them shingles, I'm not entirely sure what the actual deal is, are fairly small until we get down here, and then they're larger. We'll do that, and then we'll just sort of, like, hatch marks. And I notice each of these is kind of like a soft curve. Let's see. And obviously they're much more dense towards the shaded side, but, like, this isn't something that the artist is putting a ton of, like, focus onto each one necessarily. Just little bits to add some texture there, you can see. But, like, each individual hash mark isn't important. It's what matters is the groupings and the placement relative to the larger object and to the rows, because it gives these rings a sense of a little more depth. Like, they're not just contour lines, they're actually an important component. So I will continue, and you can sort of tell, even in the original, they sort of do some squiggles under here, give, like, a little more contrast to this particular piece, since they're trying to get the light contrasted with dark out here going. Let's see, may do a few more there. And you can sort of tell they're, like, their lines are getting a little smaller and more detailed in here, which is interesting. So it's no longer corresponding one-to-one with the rows, it's just sort of like wherever this particular material is going. But it adds a much larger sense of texture and material, and, like, the contrasts in material here. And then we'll keep going with this, and you can tell they did some there. Break it up a little bit to capture. Again, I wish I knew what the material was. I'm assuming, like, thatch, like it's a woven, but I'm not certain. I'm gonna go ahead and go down this section, since I can just kind of go ham with it. And this one we can start to see, like, the curve is even showing on the silhouette, because it's big enough and important enough that these are large, I guess, stones or rows of thatching. So we'll want to make sure whoops, that's the vector eraser. I hit the button. Wouldn't be a return stream without me doing that at least once. Oops, yeah, these ones kind of actually curve out more because they're following the overall curve of this object. This one curves in less. And these are pretty heavily shaded, so we'll get into a little more detail on them in a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and go through and keep on trying to follow the general shape. This is another thing to remember, even when you're doing from reference, you do still need to look at what you're drawing to. Now, for real life reference, you want to look at the reference more than the paper. But for this kind of thing, definitely make sure you're still paying attention to what you're doing and as well as the reference, because you're trying to match those styles. Now, you might be noticing at this point this still doesn't look anything like it. And that's because there's two more fairly subtle things in this art style that I really love. They add a lot. One of them is they're not afraid when something is important. Not afraid, as if this is a daring choice. But they will go for a larger pen and basically just do a border. Not like a jarring border, but enough that it stands out. And this we've kind of already got going on here with these, but yeah, no. We've got just that edge there. Got a little more scribble in there for that, because that's particularly dark. And I'm going to do a not as big of one, but there is still a notable line here. Despite the light, this is supposed to be pretty clear. Ah, man. Digital art. I gotta get back in the swing of it. It's still frustrating in some ways. We can keep our slightly higher line weight one. Erase our lower line weight one. Although with this kind of style too, stray marks aren't the end of the world, so long as they're not in a particularly bad place. But they kind of they're useful to work with. Okay. And now the third piece, the other secret little piece here, is, and this one may not be obvious, let me really zoom in on it, is that there is actual non-crosshatch shading on this. It's subtle, but they've got screen tones going in here. You can sort of see the grid-like pattern on it. You can see it's on the underside of the window half and all of that. And while I'm not going to use CSP screen tone tool because I've messed with it a little bit and it does weird layer damaging approaches that I don't like, it's something I need to mess with more. But for this one, we can just take the pen and take a low opacity layer below it with a much lighter gray, because it is a fairly soft one, all things considered. And we could do a softer pen, but honestly, even with this, even keeping this hardness, we can get the general feel of this, of where they were using it. Let's see. And it's barely even perceptible on this. You don't consciously notice it much at all. But when you're actually looking at the finished piece, it will look better with this. It adds just that little bit of depth. There's so many different components in this that they play nicely together to add a lot of depth. It's like in music when you have a very subtle bass line and different other backing sounds. And maybe backing vocals even, and you may not notice them when you're first listening to the song, or even on your 10th listen to the song. But if they were missing, the song would sound hollower and emptier and not as good. Let's see. So we've kind of got that. And while it's certainly not a one-to-one, in fact, I'd like to maybe erase some of these stray lines. That we know where the full bit border is, because we'll make that border pop more too. Yep, joy of joyous. I'll have to post the one of these I did with pen too in advance. Because man, I mean, look, this digital one's not bad, but I feel like that one was better. But we're not done, and always worth trusting the process, as I say. See, these are just rough scribbles, but they add a lot more, and when you lose them, it does feel shallower and emptier. It's subtle, but it's all that's needed. Okay, let's see, we were on 7. We were on this nice palette gray that I didn't save. Not quite black, believe it or not. I don't think it matches any of these grays specifically. Alright, let's look at this, because this has a little more texture, a little more detail. It's kind of interesting. And then actually, if we want this to really pop, we should include a little bit of the surrounding pieces, because none of this stuff exists without its context, without the stuff around it. So I'm going to actually just throw down another layer, and we'll start labeling these. Tower. I'm going to call this screen tone, even though it objectively isn't. And we'll call this surroundings. And we'll just try to remember which layer we're on, because there's a high chance we won't. Okay. Looking at this, looking at the surroundings on it a little bit, let's get some of the other context around here and see where that takes us. So for starters, on the right side, we've got somewhere around this point, like halfway between the door and the window. I'm using relative measurements here. We've got another peak that's not quite as steeply angled. You can kind of see the angle. This one's a little bit sharper, but it's close. And it comes up to above the window here, but not maybe like a third up from the window towards the top, between a third and a half. And we've got this sort of spike of the roof here. Oops, that one line's a little bit too far. Okay. And I'm not going to get like the full details on it right this second, because they're fairly dense and scratchy and all that, and that's not really what we need. But I do want this one like light patch, and then we'll try to get like, whoa, getting a little off course there. Just generally like the really boldly shaded part here. Let's see. And then like a nice little bump there. Outer edge meets it and then starts to go down. You kind of get the sense of the layers of materials. That's roughly right. That. And again, I'm not going to worry too much about the full window. I just want to grab like the bulk pieces, and then we'll grab our bigger pen and really, we could probably grab an even larger one for this type of thing. Just to really scratch in these shadows. Not all the way though, because we still want some of that like actual scratchy pen texture for like the ends of it and where it veers off. But we can use this for our general form filling, and then we'll go back to the 7 to get some of the details and the edges. That's a little bit of a sloppy way to mimic it. Doing this with a real pen, of course, you just fill it in and eventually it would get there. And we could do that with this, but I found that with the digital like line strokes, at least for this Millipen, it's not quite as nice. But there we go. I mean, that's just scribbles, but when you look at it in the context of the whole thing, it does feel like actual, like, the proper texture. And that's one thing I've had to learn. I've learned a lot on different art stuff over the years, again and again. As there's stuff where I'll look down and I'm like, that's just like a lazy way to do it. And you're like, no, sometimes that's actually just the right texture for the job. There was a long time where I was like, oh, watercolors are, well, this was when I was much younger, but I was like, oh, watercolors are like the kids' art thing. Like, nobody would actually want to use those for real stuff. Little did I know. We got just kind of pretty bold hatching from the shadow going on this. Coming up there a little bit. Again, I'm not going to worry too much about the details, although I like the little, like, hatch marks. And, like, kind of just like the textured chips. Give this kind of a stucco-y look. And then this is another surroundings piece, but it is important here. This kind of like, I guess it's actually a shadowed gable of the roof here, but it's so dark it's like hard to tell. It's not super critical what it is, but it provides really critical. I'm just gonna go ahead and actually do like the scratchy fill in. Better with an ink pen, of course, but we'll do what we can simulating. And it gives us this really nice high contrast, because if all of this lovely like lightness here and like the lighter inner edge here was all up against just like the nice soft planes behind it, it wouldn't pop. I mean, it'd pop okay, but it wouldn't be that much. But when we've got this super dark roof right next to it, it makes it stand out a lot more. And it means that we can also appreciate the handful of spots here where we've actually got like the lighter stuff. And you can see the edge of the roof line gets highlighted pretty well by the presence of this darkness. When the contrast is the name of the game when it comes to drawing the eye. Well, I was gonna say not literally drawing an eye, but also literally drawing an eye. But especially when you're like trying to attract the eye of like to a certain spot in your art piece. Contrast is key. May add a few more just like kind of random hatches in here just to fill out, because I feel like we've got kind of too abrupt a transition between our like backed hatching and then like the softer like or the infrequent ones. So let's add a little more there that we get kind of more of that texture transition. So we get like really loose over here, really tight over there, and like something of a middle ground as opposed to just a hard edge. Let's see. An important note here is we've got kind of like this nice roof, which mostly in the edge is just going to be like this. Eventually it kind of bleeds into an actual shingle pattern and such. But that's not terribly important for us right now. What is important is kind of this dark contrasty bit that muddles into some nice bushes. I've got a way I like to draw bushes, so I'm going to have to like untrain that one as we're doing this. Because this is also a nice way to draw bushes. Get kind of like the layers, and it's a reasonable level of detail for this, and you get like the darker with like more loops on the bottom. And then eventually you just get kind of like full dark zones in the shadows. And then you get like kind of these nice highlights from the ridge here, basically. Let's see. And you can see you get the grass texture just by using some of these repeated, but like the actual edge of the rocks you'll get with the much like more defined near full dark sections. I'm not going to go like completely because there's still some vertical like visibility stuff happening in here. You can tell that this one they really did just fill in with the pen. Let's see. I'm going to get our dark patches, and then one of the benefits of digital, so this is not all downsides, it's certainly not all downsides. One of the benefits is you can kind of, you can go back over it and just lighten it up really easily. Although that might be too much lightened up. I have to do like a few of these and then come back through and like cross over them a little bit. But we'll get our nice like kind of gentler edge up here. We get like a little bit of texture. I'm gonna have to like clear some of this stuff out that we're getting, like the ridge there. You know, this is like background detailing stuff, but it's relevant because it gives us contrast for this very bright door here. And it also is making me realize I've probably drawn it slightly too high. That's okay. Do a larger pen for some space fill. Again, just, you know, trying to simulate the actual strokes made with the pen, with the actual real-life pen, of course. Let's see, and I'm not too worried about this other stuff, because we're focusing on the tower mainly for what we're actually drawing here. So let's look at the door. First off, we can erase the parts of the loop we don't need anymore. Yay, digital art for making that super easy as well. And then let's actually like zoom in a little bit and deal with this piece. Well, hold on. One more thing. Awesome. Oh, I did all the whatever. It's fine. One more thing on the surroundings layer real quick, just so we have the context on the other side of it too. Let's see. Let's get this little roof here. It's because it helps kind of place it in its environment. Hold on, how high up is that? It's like about door height, but it's also, yeah, landing roughly where this piece ends. So yeah, okay, about there. Coolio, Bedulio. And this one is a lot lower detail because it's further back and it's not like the focal point and all of that, of course. We can basically just scribble this shape in. And for the record, I'm not saying I should clarify with the style studies. I'm not saying that this is how the artist actually does it. What I'm saying is I'm trying to learn how I could replicate pieces of this artist's style, or like learn from the artist's style, see what I enjoy about it, and then either apply that to fan art or my own art. Is there stuff, are there techniques you learn that I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that style, but I like that technique. Maybe we can adapt that into different styles that I want to draw more. Are there things where you're like, oh, I do like that style or like that character trait, how can I work it into my own thing? But the key of it is just trying to figure out basically how does the art, what makes the art tick? Why does it work? Not necessarily what specific techniques does this artist actually follow to achieve that goal. Because already we'd be on the wrong track because this artist does a lot of, you know, actual physical art, not digital. So we'd be like in the wrong medium already. You can sort of see we've got various stippling, and we've got kind of like a bush pattern going on here. They do really like curvy bushes. I like that. That's fun. And like kind of the different hatching on the bush, but still layers upon layers of it until it blurs into the shadow cast by the tower. Which does itself eventually, like, the borders of it show the hatching of other things and of like some of the edges around here. But I'm not going to worry too much about that. As you can see, we've got like a kind of nice, more straight edge grass going on here, and it kind of follows up that a little bit. Straight edge with hatching, of course. And then like the edge of this shadow ends up kind of following along with that grass pattern too. Showing what the shadow is actually falling on, which is important, because that affects the shadow just as much as sometimes more than what's casting the shadow, is what's it actually landing on. Like the tall grasses that are kind of in the way. And the grasses that it's actually falling on, being cast upon, all those shapes are important too. I'm gonna stop on all this edge stuff here in just a minute, but like, I don't know, it's fun. This is one thing I do really like about this sort of like the pen hatching styles. That I've only really recently taken a liking to, I'll be honest. Not gonna worry too much about that. It's not a key detail. It's not where our energy needs to be going. Although the artist did go through and like actually do all those individual strokes. Oh, Technabbit. Got my hand on the wrong place on it. There we go. They're more like that, with the light patch on top so you can see. And then it's got like a little parallel smokestacky tower of its own, which has, once again, okay, hold on, that was too much. Got like the bold edge on this side from the shadow. Do a little exercise here of actually tracing over the same line repeatedly. And it's got like the contours mirroring the larger one, but they're way smaller and way lower detail. Because it's not the important focal point, it's just kind of back here. It's a nice like sort of reflection of the main one, but it's not the main one. Got the contours, and we've got our kind of crosses there. And like it follows the same thing. It even has in the screen tone layer, having that screen tony gray. Much larger brush to use it with. Like this whole tower is within the screen tones. I mean, this whole building, other than like just a little bit of the roof eave where the sun's specifically catching it, gets this shadow, which again is very subtle. You probably wouldn't be like, oh, that's like screen toned in if you're just looking at it as a glance. You probably wouldn't even notice this building at all if you're just looking at a glance. Because it is, like, the screen tone helps set it back a little bit. We've got the, like, high contrast brightness here. This is all basically flat dark. Because it's not important. It's in the shadow of the building, so it makes sense with the composition, but it's also, like, not the important part of the building. So, like, it's not where your eyes should be going. But yeah, they're gonna screen tone that. Keep it in the shadows, nice and subtle. Most of these bushes and cliffs out here, other than the ones much nearer to us, and other than the tops of the bushes, but like the bottom edge of those, and then all of this stuff, also all within the screen tones. And suddenly this all is starting to feel like no individual piece looks immaculate, but it's all starting to come together, and you're like, oh, okay, that kind of fits in the scene. I do think we should have done like a larger, like an iteration on the tower. A larger iteration of the wide line, I should say. Because it is very definite in this artist's style. But it helps if I can actually, like, put it where it's supposed to be. There we go. Doing it in segments, that's fine. And that way we get the high contrast against all of this stuff in the background. So the tower itself still pops more, even within all the larger context. Ooh, I gotta take a sip of water. Yeah, I really do enjoy style studies. They're hard digitally, like trying to translate the stuff and tools into different medium, or a different medium is difficult, but they're fun. Okay. I'm actually gonna lose our actual, like, defining round border here. It's been really useful for placing all of these other lines, but it's not really actually, like, super there in the finished thing. Instead, what we have is more of a, like, sectional... Oop, let me get back to the smaller pen. There we go. We've kind of got, like, it's rounded, but there are, like, fairly clear stone quadrants on the outer edge. I'm going to just kind of follow that. And on the inner edge, of course, we have, and I've aligned the bushes wrong, but I'm going to focus on aligning this with the tower over aligning it with the bushes. The inside, we've got a more consistent, like, okay, yeah, circle. But the outer edge has a little more, because it's made up of all these, well, not keystones, but kind of keys. I guess when it's a circle, every stone is the keystone. Suddenly my marks, like, now that we're zoomed in, my marks feel so big, even though they felt tiny a minute ago. And, like, I'm not too worried about the exact placement of these. Especially because as we get lower down like this, they're really only used as a reference for really deep shadows. But then inside here, we've got slightly above all this in the original. In fact, it doesn't necessarily have to be, but they've intentionally left a light patch to keep it separate other than, like, a little hang down. And I'm going to just, like, this was clearly made with a bunch of different hatch marks and stuff. As you can kind of see the ends of the marks, and then, like, this kind of blob here. Got this central view inside of it. Let's see. That's interesting. So I've got, there is a more finished piece, the actual cover of one of the manga, that shows the same building. And it is fascinating how much different this tower looks in that particular one. In fact, heck, I closed it, I guess, instead of minimizing it. Oh well. The one I had open at the start of stream. And it's much clearer in that one that these are stones, and this is stones around an open hole. With some bushes and trees and stuff growing up around it. And, like, kind of the worn stucco or perhaps, like, mossy vines. This part's actually less clear on it. But the stones are more clearly stones. But you can even tell in the background of that image there's a further one of these, and it is just, like, the looser, quicker, like, looped-in edges and curls and stuff, because it's all that's needed at that level of detail. So it's a lot about, like, matching the texture of your strokes to the object. Like the roof on this. Like, this, trying to follow the original pattern, it's definitely different materials. It's clearly, like, not the same as this. Because it's not supposed to be. They're different things. Let's see. Yeah, you can see my line works a little sloppier and all of that. Okay. We've got kind of this repeating, like, almost flowered diamond pattern in it. Which, actually doesn't show up at all in the original. I bet I know what this is. Okay, I remember. This is probably one of the way gates. I just didn't recognize it from the back. Well, that's fascinating. Or portals, rather. I don't remember what they actually called them in this story. It's one of those things that's, like, such an essential part of so many stories now that, like, I don't Like, it doesn't need, like, its own unique sci-fi fantasy name. It just is, and everyone's like, yeah, we get what that is. But this one, you can see they're just kind of, like, getting in... Like, they're not drawing the full stones. Like, they give a lot of detail on the... Or a bit more detail on these top ones, because they're the visible ones where your eye's drawn to. But, like, generally it doesn't need a lot, because you wouldn't actually be able to see all that much if you were, you know, there in person and this was a real place. They've got a little bit of the texture shadow value ones going over these. Kind of following the shapes of the stones, but really only just enough to not, like, fully obscure them. Like, it gives them a little bit of a pop, but it's not super essential. I mean, it's essential that you follow it, because you don't want to obscure the shapes in your drawing with the shadows. Obviously, some places that's fine. Like, we don't mind obscuring this stuff, it doesn't matter. We don't mind obscuring here, because it provides good contrast and all. But, like, for something that you want to be a focal shape object, you don't want to drown it in shadows such that you can't see it at all. You want to be strategic with them. Even if you have something that's mostly in shadow, you want to be very strategic about what's visible, and not just have, like, random light patches. For example, you can sort of see in these ones, like, even these stones, they're really heavily shaded. More heavily shaded than, like, the actual, like, brickwork / thatch looking part over there. But, even with that, you can still tell exactly where they start and end, because the parts that should be reflecting light are. And it means that even when you get into the really, really deep shadows happening on this side, where, like, it can be more obscured, your brain can still fill in the gaps because it has these more detailed ones to reference off of. So once you've got some clear ones that are well defined, you and your readers' brains can sort of fill in the gaps for the ones that aren't as well defined, and you'll just be like, yeah, I know what's there, even if you don't actually draw it. Framed Ink, which is a book I've talked about a lot, which I highly recommend, talks about this strategy too, where if you've got a whole army of soldiers or whatever, we even use it with the skeleton one a little bit, but they're in shadow, you draw, like, the front soldiers well illuminated, because they would be, and then you just have to catch, like, where the light's hitting the caps or the people behind them or the little details, and, like, people will understand that there's a whole army there, even if you've only technically drawn, like, 4 people. Because that's how the lighting would actually be. It's not like a cheap move to only draw 4 people, it's because that's how it would look in that setting. Oh, thank you, Scopic. Yeah, this is a style study. You can see sort of the reference image in the left over here. We're trying to match that and sort of piece together how they do their art, so that we can learn from it. I say we, it's me. This is from a manga I've been reading called Witch Hat Atelier, which I'm quite enjoying. It's been a lot of fun, and I really love the art style. Let's see. Let me just throw the screen tones on this one, matching. Because once again, the screen tones are just kind of like a very rough, very light undercoat, but they add a little bit of depth to it. That goes a long way, weirdly. You can kind of see there's like a little bit in those ones too, under the bushes. And then that's it. And so we can sort of see, trying to replicate this style. Oh, you've heard about the manga? Yeah, no, it's a great one. Oh, yeah, the low detail lines. Oh, absolutely. Now, this manga goes all in. Like, if you actually look... I've got this way zoomed up. If you look at the original image, it's very high detail. But it's about picking your detail. Just like in a video game, when you talk about, like, the LOD, like the level of detail on what's nearby and what's far, and where you want your players to look versus where you don't want them to look. It's true in normal art, too. This one, yeah, I'll throw it in chat even. It's Witch Hat Atelier. Witch Hat Atelier. The art is just stinking gorgeous, which is why I've been wanting to study it, because, like, oh, man. So I've just been mainly studying this tower and the stuff around it, like, kind of getting context in the shadow. Oh, same, yeah. This stuff's so fun. And, like, seeing it executed so well, you're just like, oh, man. So we're taking today's stream to kind of break down, at least, what makes it work? Why does this work so much? What are all the different layers going on in it? Because there's a lot. Ooh, okay. I'm definitely down to see it. Still need to look at, like, Moebius or Moebius's stuff too, and like, oh, there's so many amazing art styles like this. Not like this, like they're all their own thing. but in that sort of using the tiny strokes to make something gorgeous like this. And we haven't even gotten to the people yet. Like, the faces are really well done, too. And, like, the poses and everything. Oh, man. I like this scene because it's, like, a closer scene with, like, smaller objects, and you can see where they've chosen to put their details. Like, this book, like, the book has a little bit. The pencils are basically just, like, rectangles. You don't need a ton on there, but it feels like a full room. Ooh, Shadow Dark. Oh, dang. Okay, yeah, that would be awesome, too. And they're making so many amazing, like, RPG systems these days. Yeah, no, these... Oh, it's going off the screen now. I've been having so many overlay problems today. Okay, come on, there we go. There we go. But, like, even zooming in, like... This doesn't actually have a ton of detail. It has just the right amount to make this look full without looking overwhelming. And it's great. Oh yeah, I mean, I've just been looking off the reference, and I mean, we put a lot of lines and stuff, but most of these aren't like heavy thought lines. And that's what's fun. And like you zoom in, you're like, oh, that's just stinking chicken scratch. But like, it's the right detail for what we need. Even my work is a little sloppier than the, you know, amazing professional artist. But like, it's cool. Now, usually the second thing I try to do in these style studies is... Oh, absolutely, yeah. Chicken scratch is applied well. Can be great. Normally what I'd want to do is do a few more references from the book and, like, spend some time. And, like, then we would go in and try to draw an actual thing using what we've learned about the style. But I think we've spent about an hour with this reference. And I don't want to jump into the people. Maybe we look at the people and how this artist, how she draws people next time. So instead, let me see if I can pull up just an interesting building or something. I know where I'm going to pull up already. And let's see if we can kind of mimic this style in illustrating it. And, like, use the stuff we've been learning. I sound like a school teacher. Let's apply what we learned today. But genuinely, though, like, if you don't apply it, it doesn't stick so well. Where's a good one? Where's a good one? That one's got, like, a lot of detail, which might be good, actually. But this, I'm looking through images of Rotenburg ob der Tauber, because I love that city. And it feels like a good candidate for this sort of thing. Although it's much boxier, so the round contour lines would not apply as much. But that'd just be a new challenge for us. Boop-a-doo. You know what? Yeah, I kind of like this view on it. It's got weird composition. Yeah, please do. Please do. And then let me know if you want me to we can check the images on stream or after. Let me... Ay. Boys of managing Discord. But let me... Oh, right, I can just pop this new one in here and we can put that right in. Yeah, I'm still using... I know I'm, like, on and off with using pure ref, but it really is nice whenever we need a reference image. Okay, yeah, let me... Discord. All of that jazz. Oh, dang, yeah, okay, this is really nice. Dagnabbit, why is everything named image underscore whatever? Nope, not what I meant to pull up. On my other computer, when I hit enter, it, like, lets me rename the thing. But in this one, it just opens it. Cool. Oh, well. We'll get the hang of this. And you said these are from Shadow Dark? Oh, word. This is why every file on this computer is, like, named garbage. Oh yeah, let me pull these in. But like, yeah, like this really fine pen work. And I mean, we can even look at this and sort of see if how they're doing it the same and differently. They've got a different approach. They're still using the hatching to follow like the shapes, but they do a lot more straight hatching in this one than the one we were looking at, which is cool. I tend to prefer the curved hatching more, or like the one that follows the texture, but this one they're still following the texture. It's just purely by having the hatching like stop at certain points. Like you get this like nice edge here because it has the empty spot, so you've got the light reflecting, and then the deeper crevice shown by the line, and then the hatching just kind of leads up to it without doing too much. They've got really bold edges on this one. That leads to an interesting effect. Definitely a little more imposing, a little harsher. And then the mountain is just entirely vertical hatching. Like, none of these hatches actually follow the slopes, but you can still tell exactly where the slopes are because of how they've done it. That's cool. It definitely gets like it feels like a much more stark image. Oh yeah, stippling, I don't actually know how to say it. But the dots as well. Yeah. Other thing that's interesting on this one is it appears to be pure hatching shading. Like, they're not using, like, the light marker to color in, it's just full hatching until it gets to a solid black. As opposed to our... Well, let me go back to our reference on this one. You can see they've got the hatching, but then they've also got kind of like the screen tony grays in here, like the dots to fill in, which is kind of interesting, a balancing. I love that. Let me see. Let me close this one and look at the other one you sent. Because it had some actual figures and a lot of high contrast. Wow, yeah. Okay, see, this one, some of the hatching follows the contour of the shapes a little more. That's in... Okay, cool. Like, you can see it follows the curve of the cloak, which makes sense because that's sort of where the shadows would actually do. The trees are all pretty consistent, though. You want the background. The background's all consistent there, even though, like, obviously, harsh shadow, harsh light, but... Like, you can still tell these are all the same material and everything, they're consistent directions, as opposed to these guys, which have very different strokes and angles and all of that. Cool. The other thing that's interesting on this one is it feels like... Well, it has a lot more dark tones just in general, but it feels like the mid-tones are a lot more sort of choked out in order to make this particular scene seem ominous and oppressive. But just also in the style in general, they have really bold borders, and like, there's not a lot of the middle gray. It's like full black for like 40%, and then it's mostly like the super brights for this 30%, and like only 20% is this middle zone. Whereas with our reference over here, like almost all of it is the soft, like gentle light. Like there's some mid grays and there's some darks, but like the dark is like, what, maybe 10-15% of this drawing? And then, like, they've got the middles to make the building pop, and then it's mostly just, like, large swaths of the really bright. And obviously different scenes will handle that differently. But it's kind of cool to see comparing these two images. Obviously, these are going for slightly more realistic faces as well, as opposed to the obvious manga face. Yeah, the dark is on steroids. But, like, even this one, like, it doesn't have that much dark, but the dark feels so much bolder where it is. Which is kind of interesting. I wonder why exactly. Like, we've got really high contrast on these plants with the solid dark and then solid white with nothing in the middle there. We don't have as much of that going on here. Interesting. A fascinating style. And it's fun to compare all these things and see all of them and try to see what makes them tick. So thank you for sharing those. Let's see, this could be an interesting angle, but I think we'd want this one. Yeah. And not a lot of shadows in this image, though. That's going to make it tougher. Let's see, even if we go over to the edge a little bit, like, there's still not a ton of shadow. Be pretty light contrast. Well, let's see what we can do with it. It may not map one-to-one, but it'll be something we test with. That said, we've been streaming for just about an hour. Oh, I mean, yeah, this is the inspiration for like half of the anime towns. It's stinking great. Love Rotenburg. But yes, I will be back in just a couple minutes though, because we've been streaming about an hour, and that is time to take a moment, stand up, stretch, use the restroom if you need to, drink some water, and then we'll come back in and we'll see if we can't get Rotenburg to kind of match this approach a little bit. May have to take some creative liberties, but that's how it goes. So I will see y'all in just a couple moments. Howdys and Salutations, we are back. Hope you had plenty of time to break the bones of all the criminals in Arkham Knight. Batman doesn't kill, but apparently he does maim. But yes, okay, taking a look at this. So, let's see, we've got our reference here. Which, I'm hesitant, like, we could go further up. But I actually kind of like the, lower focus here. It's a weird focal point, but I kind of like it for our reference. So let's go with this one, and then we'll follow the process. So we just sort of laid out what we just did in our previous version. We laid out the steps and kind of the order of operations. One thing we want to keep in mind through the whole process is where light and shadows are going to be. That's going to affect a lot of our lines, and I think that we'll probably have to same morals like me, where someone who draws a line doesn't make too much sense. Yeah, where Batman draws the line is a little weird and inconsistent and worrying at times. How much of the Batman never kills do you think is just propaganda so that, like, the police don't shut him down? He's like, I'm not a murder vigilante, I'm peaceful. Proceeds to throw 6 people off of a building. It's like, I didn't kill them, gravity did. But no. But yes. So on this, we'll have to keep light and dark in place, and I think that we'll actually put a fictitious shadow. I'm going to imagine a light source in the top right, because it'll give us a little more texture to work with, which will be good, because if everything is completely washed out, we won't be able to do much, really. So we'll get to that when we get to that. But first off, the step we lined out as step 1 on this study is really getting, like, the outline silhouette first. So I'm going to focus on this clock tower as our sort of central point. Let's see. Yeah, that's not the right. This one. There we go. We're done with the eyedropper. Okay. We'll keep this, again, not massive. We're viewing it from a slight distance. And roughly the same size for the clock itself, but squared up. I guess means this probably ought to be longer than it is wide. That's okay. And again, I'm going to try not to worry too much about detail because we have only got about 45 minutes on this one. I'm trying to stick to a fairly strict schedule today, just because I'm coming right off of a holiday, and if you don't, then, like, I kind of got to brute force my routines for a couple days in order to get back into them. So I got to go to bed at the right hour. No fudging it this time. There we go. And again, we probably don't need this level of detail, really. Not yet, anyway. Should have done the vertical lines first. Okay, let's do that. We'll do the vertical lines first. Not the right tool. Slightly higher. Slightly higher. Then off to the side more. There we go. There's kind of implied edge there. Okay. Alright, it's got like a little overhanging edge there, so not gonna worry too much about that. But yeah, I should really be focusing on the silhouette and not... Oh, hey Dex, how are you doing? Thank you for dropping in. Good to see you. How's it been? Howdy, y'all. Yes, howdies and salutations, y'all. Hope you've been doing a good stream. Over here, we're doing a style study. I've been really into the manga of Witch Hat Atelier by Kamome Shirahama. I think I may have pronounced that wrong. Apologies. And so we're trying to look into a study. It's basically like the old master studies, but where you just try to see what makes this art style work, what makes it tick. So we were looking at... Here, I'll zoom out on this. We'll go back to our reference image. Looking at our reference here from the actual manga, and then trying to figure out, okay, this looks awesome and hyper detailed. Let's see what makes it work. How are they doing lines? Where are they putting shadows? What's sort of the way they do volume? And obviously this one's a little sloppier, but I feel like we've learned a lot, so now we're trying to apply it to something else. So that's what we've been doing, but what have y'all been up to? How was your stream? Yeah, I'll jump back to our reference here. I think it was something like that. Yeah, it's good enough. Anyway, I'm going to stop focusing too much on the individual shapes and focus more on the overall form of Rotenberg. Let's see. He's down like a little more. A very bad Otome game? Like, is that the title, or is it just a very bad Otome game? Because either way, that's hysterical. Glad you had a vacation, though. Always good. I'm also regrouping from Thanksgiving out here. Just kind of a nice change of pace, but I'm glad that we're able to get back into the swing of things. Oh yeah, that's the best. Oh man. Sometimes terrible games are the best ones. This needs to be here. Then more like. There we go. There we go. Yeah. I feel like everyone has a different experience with it. Guess your results may vary, as they say. Yeah, I was fortunate. I got to see some family I haven't seen in a long time, which is nice. Let's see. Put our little ridge here, and then that'll be enough detail for this back building. Just getting the forms in. This is one like mental challenge with this process of drawing is you really have to trust the process. This particular style at the beginning, like in progress, feels so rough. But we will trust the process. Let's see, that's lining up roughly there. Cool. I'm not going to worry about this little detailed lamp over here too much. Yeah, we're not going to bother with that right now. We ain't got the time. Alright, so that'll pop down there. But I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Like overall, I mean, it's you know, it's a holiday. And it's another one of those holidays that, like, weirdly doesn't have all that much to do with what it says it's about. Like, I don't mean, like, people don't give thanks at Thanksgiving. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure it was founded by Lincoln, and, like, the whole Pilgrim story is, like, not related. But, such is the way. Even more. I know, right? Like, that's like a century later. Like, nothing to do with anything. So, like, you know, take all those stories with a grain of salt. History's fun like that. Okay, hold on. You can tell I'm rusty from break because I can't draw circles at all anymore. Hey, there we go. Nope, that's, you know what? Just make it bigger. That's so far off. Good enough. We're roughing it in. This is a low precision style right now. Oh boy. Okay. Like, yeah, there's some of the background detail stuff. I'm not gonna worry about it too much. Blob of people that I'm just gonna generally mark there. Like, tiny bit of street. This is a really weird angle of this photo. That's good. Like, oh, I know, yeah, all that stuff evolved. Well, I mean, it's true. Every tradition, quote unquote, has probably seen a lot of different variations, and frequently they have, like, almost nothing to do with what they say they're about. Which is grand and fascinating and terrible, but also fascinating. I mean, like, Halloween's got... Halloween is so far away from its original premise, and it's merged with so many other holidays. And, like, Christmas, of course, like, I don't think it's even the right time of year if you go with, like, the early Christian ideas of when it should be. Like, we're so far off. Because they merged it with some Roman ones, and then, like, the trees came from a bunch of later things. And, joy. Fascinating how all that stuff develops. It's there's so many, like, even if, assuming no one ever changes the traditions, which is usually a bad assumption to make, but even if no one intentionally changes them, like, sometimes generations just misunderstand or don't have the same resources, or, like, they're in a different place or whatever, and so the customs just change, or they, like, steal ideas they like from their neighbors, or just all sorts of things. But yeah, especially, like, the early Christian stuff and how they, like, merged and, like, welded the old pagan stuff into the beliefs is really fascinating. Like a lot of American holidays haven't had much time to get completely off the rails, but they still can. I mean, Thanksgiving isn't particularly close to what it used to be, or was supposed, what it may never have actually been. It'll just be season. I mean, Christmas is already, like, slowly absorbing Thanksgiving. It's invading into, like, pre-November stuff. So, yeah, honestly, matter of time. And next thing was some contour lines. Like, shape contours more than anything else. This doesn't have a ton of that, although these wood panels are pretty good for it. There's some nice perspective, too. These don't have to be, like, particularly clean contours either. Get, like, a little texture by popping these up here. Let's see. Oh, I know. My family gets, like, the biggest source of holiday strife we have is, do you put the Christmas tree up on Thanksgiving? Or do you wait until the day after? Because, I mean, like, everyone's together. You're there, so, like, you've got the people to, like, get it out of the attic or whatever and set it up. But, like, it feels like it's creeping into the previous holiday too much. It's like, We're getting a little too into detail with those. We're kind of merging the detail and the form ones a little bit here. That's okay. Ooh, gonna be a long line. Time to get Christmas presents. Yeah, like, it's all that stuff is just wild. That's one way to do it. Get the sneaky early setup going. You're speed running it. I'm trying to think, because do I want the focal point to be on this? I mean, I feel like I do. Like, at the same time, it's like the least interesting, least textured thing. No one alerts the dudes to check on the others if you take out the lead. I guess that makes sense. That does change things. That you could build an entire strategy around like a much more actually covert approach. Doing that. It's like in Hitman when you go after the security rooms. Okay. Getting caught up in the wrong details on this one. What I really ought to do next is basic shadow hatching. Okay, yes. Okay. So if we got a light source, imaginary light source happening up here, we're gonna have like a little bit there. We're just getting like broad forms. Like this whole thing really is going to be in some amount of like shadow. Oh, jeepers, too much tilt. I'm so used to with the microns, I can get like a thinner line by tilting my pen. And I keep trying to do it here, and it does not work. This one we might actually have like... I'm going to go into crazy detail on it. Doesn't need crazy detail. Playing fairly fast and loose because I'm on a bit of a timeline on this one. But we'll see what we can do. I am trying to straddle the line a little bit because you've got the shadow under the eave, but you're also going to have the shadow it casts. Which is actually going to cast onto the roof itself. Likewise with this, of course. Got a lot of shadow that it's casting. A bit underneath this one as well. And of course, down here. I could probably just do scribbles on these, honestly, but like, I don't know. I do still want to make sure these shadows are making sense along with textures and everything. So like some of these, it's a little rough, but this is also going to be a fairly low detail part. Thank you. Yeah, you have a good night too. Thank you for dropping by. It's good to hear from you. Okay. Now let's get to, oh right, we need some of our actual details. We've got like the texture going on there. Key details that might be done with things other than kind of our little bit stuff happening there. Do I even attempt another circle after all of our chaos? Do I just give up and use the circle tool? Never. That is good enough for my purposes. This is, after all, a quick study. This is not a, hyper-finished piece. We'll see how it goes. Oh yeah, it has been a while since I saved. Ooh, I'm out of the habit of doing that too. there's like actually something up there, but like it's not important for this. Okay. Let's see about getting some hatching that actually stinking matches the textures. This is the next challenge, and then we'll do more details like windows and stuff. But out here, we're going to have, like, we've got the rows a little bit. Just in general. But we're going to have, like, a lot more of them visible under here. And then whatever's happening with this loop. And I got into the texture one a little early with that. You know what, that actually wouldn't have too much shadow from the angle we're doing at, so we don't need that level of detail on it. We'll have like, a couple of bricks that have got like a nice little shadow at the top, but... Let's see, honestly, like we could probably get away with like... Not even that. Maybe even less. Honestly, those bricks aren't that important. We've got like the windows. We can kind of like have like a little bit of something going on there to give them some texture. But for the most part, we've got these, and then we're going to have the actual brick texture going along inside of it. I'm going to mostly just have some vertical lines and then not worry about it beyond that. High contrast to put against this fairly nice light roof, which you can see we'll get like a little bit, but we're not going to do too much until we get more into this. We've gone a little too dominant on our cross shading because, again, I don't have pen pressure. Like, this pen isn't pen pressure receptive, and I didn't think to mess with that when we were doing it. That's on me. That's something to think about on the shift from digital to physical. Get like a little shadow on the underside of these bricks, make them pop just a tiny bit more. And again, we can use the bold outline option for stuff that really needs to pop. This really doesn't have much texture at all, so I can just like do that. This one has the really bold horizontal lines. I mean, it's still scratchy right now, but like you can sort of start to see the pieces coming together. Oh, right, of course, most of these are actually going to be semi in the shadow over here, too. We can even do, like, just sort of like what we saw before, where there's, like, a little light patch, but mostly darkness. Not sure it's going to translate as well, because we're being kind of scribblier and looser with this. And because these bricks are fairly loose as is. That kind of works. Really emphasize into that line. I'm going to actually do the curved rows much like we saw in the original, but just solidly across down here. I hit the eraser button again. My pen like slowly rotates in my grip until like I'm on that button, which is probably what it's designed to do, because normally you want to be able to hit the buttons on the pen. I've just been doing a little whoopsie. I'm not even gonna bother with the people. Not right now. Not as important. Sorry, people. Let's get that. Like, we're at such a weird angle on this one that we can't even, like, see much of the window. That's fine. Alright, but this is one that I'm kind of... actually... Oh, it was these. Oh, right, yep. Okay. Because these shingles kind of have an actual, like, curve to them. I know we've done them a little bit. Let's get them that, like, curvature that they deserve. Because it is nice. And it means that I can basically just use kind of this curve, like layered curves as our shading here. Assuming that I don't, like, you're too far off of it. And unfortunately, because it's pretty solid shadows, because we've got square shapes, not like the nice curve we were working with in our reference, we're not going to have much of a gradient with it, but that does give it a bit of texture. Whereas this one, which is fairly well lit, will have a bit of it. But, like, not nearly so much. I'm gonna do, like, a little long... Okay, well, not when they get that far off the line, but, like, a little bit of just, like, a hatched line off... off the edge to kind of catch the edge of the shingles appearance a little bit more. And, like, this is going to be actually a pretty solidly dark line. And it's going to engulf some of the roof, too, because this wall is just going to be very, very dark. Let's see. Let's see. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Got some rubbery stuff happening here. But it's like... all so far in the shadows that I'm hesitant to even include much detail in it at all. Like, they're not really the focal points of this anyway. Let's see. Ah, there might be a light source down here because they've got these little, like, lanterns. Okay. We can work with that. That gives us something to work with. Yeah, honestly, that thing is not street legal. Crazy uncool of him to do that. I feel like rubber bullets fired out of a tank cannon are still pretty bad for you. Like, don't quote me on that. But, like, I'm pretty sure that's still bad. A little bit of the greenery going in here. Have like one actually illustrated window because it's got a proper light source. He's kinda. And we'll just, everything else will continue the darkness, but we'll have that one like nice little semi-lit patch. My darks probably aren't quite deep enough in most places. I'm gonna want like higher contrast on a lot of this if we're really gonna actually lean into that. I feel like just scribbling it in doesn't really get quite the feel that we're going for. So it does, you know. Oh, this particular little lantern and street scene pop, which if we want to do that, this would be a good way to do that. Stone's a little more texture going there. Here's some of that. But I feel like we're veering a little too far away from the original premise now of trying to match the style. Because for the darks, we should be using like much more solid darks for these, so I may break out the bigger pen in a minute for that. And these buildings, the details aren't actually all that important. They are going to be better lit. So maybe they are important just for context on the other building. You know what? Hold on. Let's get our screen tone layer in here. I realize we're not quite done with this one, but I think it'll help give us some context to work with in terms of like lights and shadows and stuff. Probably should have done this from the get-go, just to make it real clear where the shadows are and aren't. Because that's one benefit of this, is if you lay these in early as opposed to at the end as a bonus piece, it is helpful for figuring out your values and contrast areas. Like, and I'm just laying it in, obviously, real rough right now. I'm going to switch to a smaller one so we can get some of these more detailed spots, but even so, we're not, like... We're not getting, like, super precise, like, nice placement on this. This is real sketchy all the way through. Which is part of the fun of a style like this. Because it means you can genuinely just kind of, like... It's not a bad approach, like... For this style in its full beauty, of course, it's a huge amount of effort and time, and it's amazing. But for quick things, it's also the kind of thing that you can use to kind of just jot down ideas with these quick, like, micron-like or pen-like notes and learning how to apply the right details quickly. It goes a long way. But it also shows me that my hatching has a long way to go. And that this piece's composition is stinking weird with what we've done with it. But that's okay. The sun's over there, then technically... Shouldn't that roof be in... Yeah, I don't think any of my shadows are facing the right direction. Because if we're getting the light source from front here, really it ought to be more... Like, all of this ought to be, like, a little bit shaded. And then we only ought to have the really brights, like, on the back side of things, like there. Is one approach. Try something like that. I'm gonna do, like, an alt screen tone. And, like, really kind of think about... Because that would put a lot of stuff into darkness, and we'd probably have to have, like, tiers of darker shading to make that work. That's gonna drop most of the scene into the dark. Just a couple of distinctly bright exceptions. Yeah, see, like, that's probably too much in shadows if we move the light source that far away. Unless we're really gunning for, like, a very interesting, like, kind of more somber piece. Which we could always do. Draw a lot more attention to that little street scene there. We'd have to add some details to make that work. Which, again, is an option. Like, at this point, like, now that we've sort of got a loose sense of the style, obviously this is very scratchy. But, like, once you have a loose sense of the style, it gives you something to sort of work with and, like, experiment with more. And you can be like, okay, what if we push it in this direction? Do this thing with it. Or we could stick to our lighter one for now. I'm realizing I kind of like this, and then we can use the hatching to really lean into the shadows where we need them. I'm just going to call this one Dark Mode Screen Tone and Dark Mode Rotenberg. Because why not, you know? Okay. Grab this. We'll go in here. Let's take our pen, our larger pen, and really get the shadows where they belong. Because there's going to be some areas that are in full darkness now. And they'll just have a little bit of texture on the edge. is also going to be like most of this. Barring a couple of things that are going to catch a little bit of light from the bottom. Yeah, no, that would be too much on that one. I like the direction we're going with this, but it does feel like we're, like, once again, getting kind of maybe too far away from the style. This is a lot more bolder lines and everything than I think we'd necessarily want in practice. Let's see. With light source over there, actually some of these would not be. Got a little overzealous with my screen tone there. Certainly this will cast a bit of a shadow. Like a lot of the fronts of these buildings will actually be fairly well lit. That's going to cast shadow and all, but 1-2 generally speaking. I got a little bit overzealous with my shading earlier. Of course. Lose most of that edge too, which is probably good. We'd have more shadow here if not for the lantern, of course, but let's see. Yeah, or we're veering off course, but we're going to follow wherever this road is taking us for a few minutes and see where we land. First off, let's catch some of the rubbery shadows and everything that would be more visible under here, like underside of a window or some such. Like edge of this window too, that's going to be catching just a bit of the light from this lantern. Not a ton of it, but a little bit. Makes me think that this part probably wouldn't catch it so much though. If we're just getting like the underside. There we go. A lot of contrast. It's bringing a lot of light to this scene, so we may or may not want that, but you know. I'm going to go ahead and grab some of the dark mode screen tone to make sure that these areas are getting screened properly, but oh, right, because this is drawing in white. It's not erasing. Well, no, it is erasing. Maybe it is just an optical illusion and that really is the gray. But no, there's clearly not gray there. Okay. Ah. But the gray's on top. But that should be fine. No, this is on top. Okay, but erasing... Yeah, okay, there we go. We're still getting, like, the screeny tones in there and all that. No, okay, better. Not perfect, but better. see where this lands us. Oh, with a lot more detail in these windows for starters. They're in pretty good light. Be able to see some of the woodwork, although I've gotten the angle of this building slightly off, so it's going to be hard to reference it for woodwork particularly. We'll bluff a little bit there. I have noticed interesting thing with the shading in this particular artist. We didn't see it so much where I was looking, but a lot of times when they're doing a line, rather than doing like one long line, they will kind of do the scratches to get it, but it will also like fade into like smaller lines, and then specifically like some of them continue on with dots, and it gives it a much more intentional feel, but also like a little bit of like that fading texture still, which is really nice. We haven't been mimicking that so much here, but it's just a good thing to keep in mind. In fact, I'll leave that as just like kind of a split between the two. The dark mode Rotenberg ought to even have like a little bit happening there. On the roof down a little bit. Okay. So next time I'm going to do my shade hatching on digital in like a thinner pen, because it's been a little too dominant over the texture hatching. So like, we'll sort of see there. Thank you. Yeah, we're starting to try to bring this together a little more. I had to rethink the light source a little bit. Actually, no, hold on. This light's going to hit that a lot, so we'll get like some of the texture happening around here, especially as we get into the darker, but otherwise it'll just be like a couple of little spots. Anyway, lantern box type deal. Okay. It's not pointing towards the right vanishing point. Hold on. Yep, there we go. Okay. This one's closer, so I really ought to do it higher detail. I realized I just went like silent there for a minute. Sorry, I was like trying to focus on... kind of lost in the music and trying to focus on how we were going to do the shadows on some of this. And yeah, we'll see, but this stuff isn't super critical. Level being, you know, wherever it is. Got people and fences and stuff in the way that I'm not going to try to catch in this one. Okay, planter boxes. That's something we could flash windowsills. Kind of the same energy, really. Yeah, Rotenberg in this amount of time may have been a little more than we could chew, but this is still, like, interesting approximation of it. Kind of like the hanging lantern that's in the actual reference image, like right about here. May not mess with that right now, but I'm trying to think if there'd be a good way to get, because we need a little more light texture going on here. I mean, we could always just go from the lantern we've got. Kind of get like a bit more going on the underside there, but it's hard to believe that it would be really reflecting like a ton all the way up here. Maybe we do just throw in that one, like, kind of just for texture's sake. Just kind of experimenting. Doesn't need a ton of detail, but on the screen tone layers, it means we can kind of punch a little bit of a hole through things, and like get like a little more texture going on in some places. As it kind of messes with some of the really stark lighting we've got going on over there. But like you can kind of see at this point, we're just like iterating on it repeatedly and like tweaking the light source a little bit. But it definitely shows how important it is to figure out your lights and shadows before you commit to all the details, because you don't want to have to redo all of those hash marks, all the hatching. So I should have probably worked this out a little better before I started, but that's okay. I believe that this stuff could catch the light. That could definitely, like, the frame on that one could catch it a little bit. Let's get a little more of that going. On the lower corner of it too. Lower edge of the bricks going on there. Eve. Okay. Just something. Maybe lighten this whole area up a little bit. Not a ton, but like a bit. I don't know. We can keep tweaking on it and so on. Maybe we continue it next stream, but I think we'll probably move on to other things. But it's just an interesting little study here. And I feel like we were, even if we got into some weird situations with the shading towards the end there, we were able to apply some of the interesting texture stuff we learned. And we can sort of think about how to better apply it next time. Like this one, I ended up with more solid shapes and like darker shading. I really probably should have done a lot of that shading still in the hatch marks, as you can see here, because it keeps a slightly more consistent overall texture. I think next time we'll need to think a little more about our reference and where the light and shadows fall, and all of that jazz. But for now, I think this has been an interesting little venture. We will probably continue the style studies for this, looking at characters next time, or maybe more buildings, we'll see. I don't want to overcommit on anything too much, because, you know, still got to prep for the next stream, and people are hard to draw. So, but maybe we can look at some of the interesting details, like how they do eyes and hair and stuff, even if we don't nail face shapes and all that. So, some stuff worth studying, but we'll pick that up on the next one. So until then, thank you for dropping by. It was good to see you, Scopic. Thanks for dropping in. And I hope you have a good evening. And for everyone else, a good afternoon, morning, evening, 3 a.m., whenever it may happen to be. I hope y'all have an excellent one, and I will catch y'all on the flip side. So have a good one. And thank y'all for dropping by.